Hello, welcome to Pod Songs, where we interview inspiring people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today's musical guest is Creature Comfort, a Nashville-based boot-gazing band. Think Fleet Foxes in a rural setting. Together we're interviewing Charles Van Rees, a co-host of the Nature Guys podcast, a wetland ecologist and conservation biologist with expertise in freshwater biodiversity and ornithology. Welcome, Charles Van Rees and Creature Comfort. Oh wow! Oh my God! That's a lot of people there.
There's five of us, so.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I mean, and we probably won't do much talking, like you said. So
that's hilarious. Normally, yeah. It's me and someone else, and now it's like it's living. It's real.
Real people. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Back there.
How's it's what 4:00 there in the afternoon?
Exactly. Yeah. 3:30. Yep. Here in Italy.
Perfect.
Are you guys in? Is it Nashville or?
Yeah, Nashville, Tennessee.
And are you in the city or in the countryside or in a log cabin or where is it?
No, it says no. We're in the city, sort of. We're in the city proper. Yeah, it's just by the river. Nashville's pretty small, realistically, so the downtown urban area is not very large. So you don't have to drive very far to feel like you're not in the city.
Nashville's a strange place, though.
Yeah.
I've been through once.
Yeah, we, well, I guess all of us are from Tennessee, and most of us grew up in a small town about an hour and a half south of here. So we just sort of went to college after high school, and then after that moved to Nashville, and it sort of went through a boom around 2000, late 2000s, and just really became something that it wasn't when we were kids. So
yeah, we all think of Nashville as the music town, but I think it's actually the head of the medical industry as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of I'm actually in the medical field.
Oh, there we go.
As well, so yeah, lots of medical here too.
Yeah, I heard there's mansions as far as the eye can see in on the outskirts.
In certain parts, especially like south and like southwest.
Those are all the country singers.
Here, I'm trying to reposition my head better. There we go.
Well, my brother moved to Texas, to Austin, when he was because he's a harmonica player and he wanted to go. Had the vision of moving to the music capital of the world and Austin, and that was great. But that's filling up with this because there's low tax rates in Texas, so everyone from California is moving to Austin, and
right.
I think Tesla and Apple and everyone's just another boom town. So I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? It's like wherever the musicians go.
Yeah, just give it a few years and everyone else will follow.
Yeah. I remember too places like Berlin as well. They become music capitals, and everyone moves into the neighborhoods where the hip people are and the musicians, and then push up the rent prices, and then all those people have to move on to an even cheaper neighborhood, and it's this gentrification cycle. Yeah,
that's why we're returning to the country, man. The rest of them don't know it, but we're making an exodus back to the homeland, back to the cow fields. We're gonna be off the grid.
So introduce yourself, guys. Where are you? What are you from? What are you doing? The whole shebang.
So we are Creature Comfort. We're a band out of Nashville, Tennessee. Right now, I think our drummer's actually showing up. Sorry, this
drummer's always late. I mean, that's just so stereotypical.
But yeah, we're a band out of Nashville, Tennessee, and we've been kicking it for 9 years almost, which is kind of a long time to hold a group of people together. We've had a lot of lineup changes, but 4 of us are from the same hometown, Tullahoma, Tennessee, and I don't know. It's just yeah, I don't know. We make what we call boot gaze, which is like a dialect of indie rock with more slightly southern influences. I suppose you could say.
Wow, you have your own genre.
Well, I mean, you have to create your own genre.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Everybody likes a hashtag genre, you know.
Boot gazing. That's great. I love it.
That's you coined the term. Well, right?
Shoegazing.
Yeah.
I've heard shoegazing, but yeah, you mean
We said boot gaze and fleet foxes for people who grew up baling hay was the other thing. Because Jesse is a big hay baler.
Well, I grew up on a cattle farm, so sort of. I mean, my dad farmed cattle on the side, so I did a lot of farm activities growing up.
I heard that your favorite tractor is a John Deere 6155 RH.
Well, that's the one I was on. Yeah, that's in our bio. Yeah. No, I mean that thing was nice. I was like, was it 70? I mean, it was air conditioned. Like when you have an air conditioned tractor, that's something. That's something else.
You've got to paint a nice pic. You know, I imagine you fork in the bales of hay, and no, you're driving around in AC. I mean, this is not.
Andy's listening to Revolver in the tractor. Oh no, you get a cassette of the
smoking the
He's
doobie.
probably maybe. I don't know. You'd have to ask him about it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to reposition so we can all get in the frame. I guess it's irrelevant, but because this is a podcast.
Yeah.
But the video thing's throwing me off. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to be late. I'm sorry.
No, it's you're good.
That's good.
We've
job
had
we didn't
some
do a
crazy
sound check. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. I was afraid that like we were going to lose power. We've had some pretty bad storms. Like I woke up to thunder and lightning this morning, and but luckily it sort of passed for the moment.
And so, how many albums have you released now?
2 technically full albums.
2.5.
Yeah. Here, you talk a bit. Cole.
Hi. Cole. I play bass and a little bit of backup singing, I guess. Yeah, we did. We've done 2 full lengths now. The most recent, which Home Team, came out last year, right before Halloween. We've got an EP from a few years before that called Echoes and Relics, and then our original one from, I guess 2000. Yeah, it would have been 2014. 13. 2013.
Mm-hmm.
You get the bass line is that fantastic bass line on that song, Big Buff and Handsome. That's a great bass line.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a little bit more of a country tune, so I tried to evoke a more walky approach, I suppose, but still keep it, modern indie, I guess.
And you do a lot of seasonal stuff then. If you're in Halloween, I mean, you've had Christmas in Quarantine was another good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The band's actually just a pretext for getting sponsored by Hobby Lobby or Pottery Barn.
Do you own Christmas? Do you own cards as well?
Oh yeah, Jesse makes Christmas cards.
Yeah, I make Christmas cards that are just absurd, and I always put the text or whatever I'm saying. I'll put in like drippy blood letters.
What was it with that scaring that little girl in one video I saw? That was freaky.
Oh, that was just a promo. That was actually our old drummer's child.
That was dark.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about
I haven't seen
it wasn't actually dark. The edit was dark.
The edit was dark. Yeah. So let's just paint the picture for anyone who hasn't seen it. Is that you're dressed as Father Christmas. A little girl comes and sits on your lap and asks you what you want for Christmas. She gives. So I think she asked for a rocking horse or something nice. And
yeah.
You pull down your beard and you say to her, "Why don't you go and see a Creature Comfort show?" I mean,
yeah.
I'd like to say this was before I joined the group.
Wow. Thank you.
Well,
should listen to the guys at the back there.
Yeah. No, they make a lot of wise choices because Al and Charlie, they how long have y'all been in the band? 2018 essentially. Yeah. Well, I mean, we that's when we went into the studio to make our last record, and we essentially wrote an entire record with our former guitarist, and then we parted ways with him about 5 weeks before we went into the studio. So we frantically
Breakups.
called Charlie and Al, and they came in and just...
What happened? Come on, do you want to go into a breakup story or?
Not really. It's
I will say, just for context, I play lead guitar. This is Charlie speaking. I play lead guitar and slide guitar, and Alex plays everything under the sun. Backing vocals, banjo, keyboards, acoustic guitar, lap steel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does it all.
He's going to do tuba on the next one.
Oh, banjo I just love the banjo. It just grooves a track. I mean, that song, Big Buff and Handsome, which has been on repeat for me. It's just that awesome. Banjo is underneath, just pushing things along, isn't it? It's what just gives it that. I would love to have banjo on so many of my songs, but I can't play it, and I don't know anyone here in the south of Italy. Not a big instrument around here.
Yeah, that banjo was a tough sell. Jesse gave me the demo for that song, and I sat on it for a little while and kind of tried some different stuff out and picked up banjo to play on it and found that little groove, that little riff, and really liked it. And it was like, all right, hear me out. Like, what if we put banjo on this, like, banjo disco song?
Yeah, that's it. Banjo disco, yeah. Because the drums are also lifting along there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It ended up working out.
Yeah, when we went into the studio, we had this idea of what our single was going to be, like the single, you know, and we thought it was going to be our song Heartstrings, which is still like a, you know, good song. But our producer like turned around and he's like, no, that's not your single. He's like, this is your single. And I was just like, whatever, man. But it was after we had, you know.
But that's not boot gazing, is it? That's disco.
Well,
what is that?
You could call it you could call that disco rodeo if you wanted to. But,
okay, all right. We got a genre bending here.
It's heavy on the boot, light on the gaze. On that one.
Boot scooting.
But yeah, boot scooting.
and the video is with a Bigfoot, a genuine Bigfoot. Where did you find him?
Well, we were out in the woods one day and
just happened to capture it.
Yeah,
incredible.
No, that's one of our friends is in a costume that was made for the video. So we had a special effects. I guess it's a special effects makeup costume school in Nashville, and we hired the director for the video, and he reached out to the school, and they turned a Chewbacca into a, you know, yeah.
But he could walk the talk. I mean, he had a real. The gait is very important when you're
not very tall. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just like incredibly tall guy. Our friend, yeah, he's actually a really good musician too. Yeah, everybody here plays guitar, I guess.
But we shot it at a lake around here, though, and I don't think that some of the people just hanging out at the lake could like actually see the cameras.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so, like, if you were on a boat looking at the shore, you would just see Bigfoot in the distance. I think it really did kind of freak some people out. Like
that were looking over, just like, what is going on?
Yeah, we had Bigfoot on the float out in the lake. You know, I mean, it was pretty convincing. People at the gas station too were taking pictures with
the
them.
local paper following up. There was sightings.
Well, that's what I was hoping. I really
free publicity.
Really wanted. Really wanted someone to grab it, but it didn't quite go that far.
There were no rogue TikToks made with the Bigfoot, unfortunately.
We'll get them next time.
We'll get them next, yeah.
And that shoot was so special too because we did that last year, and of course, obviously, the last year being all COVID and not much to do. You know, that shoot was just like one of the most pleasant days of the entire year because it was a small crew. It was pretty much just us and director and, you know, a couple of people helping out and old Sasquatch, and like it was a beautiful day at the lake, and I think it just really came through in the video. I think you can tell like we were having a much needed joyous day of just like, you know, fraternal love.
That's
nice.
great. I'm not allowed to go into the countryside here in Italy. We're in a red zone, so I can get fined if I go into the forest, with or without a camera crew.
Not in America, baby.
Land of the free, home of the brave.
And the very sick.
And we're in the healthcare capital. Oh, oof.
So are you guys a bubble then? I mean, is that what is the term? Or?
Yeah, most of us have been vaccinated.
Really?
So, yeah.
Except me, I'm the lone. It's not that I'm anti. I want it. I just haven't been able to get it yet. But I actually just had COVID like 2 weeks ago.
Really?
And so I got some natural immunity kicking for a while.
Wow.
So
how was it?
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. But it wasn't the worst thing I've ever experienced either. For me, it was just kind of like a flu, and Cole got it and Taylor got it too. And I think for all of us, it was like just kind of a bad flu.
Yeah.
I'm still working on getting the smell back though. It hasn't totally come back yet. Yeah.
Did not know that.
The loss of smell and taste, again, for me, when I had it, there's a really weird psychological component to eating that you don't really recognize when you're doing it until those senses are withdrawn, and then you're like, wow, this just tastes like gray bland mush. It doesn't taste, every time you're
that's
eating
American food though.
Well, it is. So yes, that's where that's your baseline, and then you're doubling down without the taste or smell, and it just is a miserable experience. It's not great.
Okay.
But we're getting there.
Yeah.
We got vaccinated, and none of us are.
I kept thinking have you seen Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story with John C. Reilly? He can't smell in it, and they're like, don't you ever stop to smell the roses? And he says, no, I can't. It's like, I literally couldn't stop to smell the roses. Yeah.
That's great. So what else is important to know about creature comfort for all the listeners out there?
Wow, the hardball questions.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's something that's important, at least. Jesse's the lyric writer, and I do think he operates a very unique place of like Southern coming of age tunes. I don't know many people that write these type of introspective songs from an American South perspective. Like, coming of age tunes are obviously as old as time, but it seems to speak to a really unique culture and part of the world and a time that seems very unique to people in our demographic and location, I think.
Because songs like, what is it, Common John, Southern Shame? Is that what that kind of...
Yeah, I think that's...
I love that one.
And Woke Up Drunk was another great example of that too, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I'm a progressive. I mean, we're all progressives living in the South and a very non-progressive place. I mean, generally every city in America is blue, but you go, 15, 20 minutes outside and it's, very different.
Okay. So, talking about our guest then, transitioning into, we're talking today to Charles Van Rees, who's a biologist. So, what was it particularly that made you wanted to speak to him?
Well, he just sounds, I don't know, I have a soft spot in my heart for nature. Just, I think, growing up on a farm and
in an air-conditioned tractor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, he'd probably... Yeah, I mean...
Listen, don't let him fool you. Jesse, last time we were out at his farm, he's He's hitting a lick on it. He's driving cattle around. He's cutting down the fences. We were shooting guns. Don't let him fool you. He's not that.
No, I mean, but I still.
I think this guy's going to stay in the band for a long time, though. He's got the right attitude.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, what am I trying to say here? Yeah, it's my thoughts are runaway. So I'm a scientist in the sense that I'm in the medical field, and I just wanted to talk to another scientist, someone that I could relate to at least on a certain level. But climate change that kind of keeps me up at night, and he's not necessarily involved directly with that, but trying to conserve what already exists and potentially, prevent it from worsening. And I think that's pretty cool, pretty noble.
I got to say, as someone from more the Appalachia region, conservation, climate issues have always been extremely important because that area was particularly vulnerable to being abused by coal industry, different mining industries. So I think that talking about conservation in terms of community and in terms of Southern identity, there is a link there that I think we have dealt with in one way or another that we'd like to explore further.
Is there still a lot of nature in your area, or has it all been reduced?
There's still, there's a lot of nature, but I think there's probably imbalances though that exist. I mean, for instance, I can think of like when I was 14, I had a friend who moved. He moved close by, became my neighbor, and he was from Alabama. And there were these. He would talk about red ant hills, and we didn't have red ants. Well, flash forward 2-3 years, there were tons of red ants on my parents' farm. They were everywhere. These just huge mounds. And growing up, I would never see armadillos. That's not a thing that you would see in Middle Tennessee. Well, now you'll go on the road and see an armadillo carcass because they follow the red ants. Now, do I know that that's necessarily linked to, an imbalance in nature? Maybe not, but just things like that. I think there's definitely imbalances.
There's also invasive species. KUDZU in Appalachia is a big invasive species that's completely taken over. But also with some of these, like there still is a lot of nature, but when it comes to a lot of the, mining industries in places like, West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Southwestern Virginia, that have devastated the land in sort of different ways, whether it's, poisoning the drinking water, the groundwater, or, we see blight on pine trees and things like that, species that are going extinct. The American chestnut tree, things like that we're sort of losing. Like there still is a tremendous amount of natural beauty in the Smokies and in the greater Appalachia, but it is changing, and it's changing, but it's also an under-researched, developed area that is at risk of sort of falling by the wayside.
Because even you're in America, your parents or your grandparents' parents, or could they have photos next to huge cedar trees and fantastic nature? No, that's gone.
Now it's kind of on that note. It's like a great irony I've always found in living in the South is that we're, by history, an agricultural society. Obviously, this was the farming wing of America. And even to this day, agriculture is a huge part of Southern culture. People like to go hunting and fishing and all of this and that. But the irony is that they don't want to do anything to protect these activities they like.
Yeah.
They vote in favor of corporations, businesses, deregulation that undercuts their own interests, basically. And so it's this really strange double thing, or duality that like it seems hypocritical to me, at least. And I've always, ever since I was a kid, kind of wondered about, like, if you love the outdoors and hunting so much, why do you bring in corporations that deforest or do mountaintop removal?
Yeah,
Or
my folks grew up in small towns in, very small communities that had little town squares, with a mom and pop grocery store, mom and pop restaurants. It was all just run by the community and sustained by the community. All those places are now just sort of sitting in ruin. Boarded up windows have been pretty much my whole life. And now you see, each town has a Walmart and there's a Dollar General every 10 miles, and that's what the entire area just subsists on is, they've just had to bend towards these corporations, whether they wanted to or not. But it is part of that, did they make that conscious decision, or was this sort of more imposed upon them? I don't know.
Right. It becomes a sort of habit. And when you get into corporations coming in from out of town and establishing businesses in places they otherwise might not be, it's like you get kind of a twofold habitat destruction. You get the habitat destruction of like natural species, but you also get like a human habitat destruction in a way, that the removal of reliance on mom and pop institutions and that sort of thing. So it's a bit more of a meta destruction, but
And I mean, not to shift gears too much, but I think one thing that always kind of came across to me in songs like Common John are things like, well, how do you reconcile the fact that there are a lot of aspects about the South that we might not agree with, or that we might, take issue with, or, see some of the shortcomings of being a Southerner living in the South, but also have an amount of pride in being a Southerner. And it's sort of a difficult thing to want to be prideful of where you're from and have pride in your, where you were raised, but also to have to really face some of the tough issues that your, region has imposed, whether it's, race issues, whether it's poor economic issues, whether it's, poor conservation issues, but also trying to have pride.
So you're saying it's also not just the animal species that are under threat, but it's also the diversity of human culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we lose that sense of small community, which helps sustain each other. I mean, I think 100, or as recently as maybe 50 years ago, even, you had smaller communities that were a little more self-sustaining and perhaps just a little more like sustaining within a more sort of social emotional sense, and I think we've sort of lost a lot of that. And we're especially seeing it in a town like Nashville, where people are just moving here in droves and have been for the last almost decade. And it's becoming less and less recognizable. People aren't, communicating in the same ways. Places where people do communicate, coffee shops and venues and things like that sometimes go by the wayside. And I think that, getting back to, and especially in a post-COVID world, finding a new sense of community is going to be.
Yeah, has COVID accelerated this, do you think?
I don't know.
Hard to say.
I think that COVID, what we're talking about here is like a kind of a fear of homogenization of culture. And I think that's accelerated by the internet, because you lose regional identity through big business, through corporate expansion, and through the internet. And I do think COVID accelerates that, because part of a regional identity is things you actually do within the region.
Yeah.
When you're not allowed to do things within the region, and when all of your social activities relegated to the internet, we end up all interacting in the same way.
I think it makes it harder for bands to come through as well, and musicians, because everyone just, TV programs, everyone just watches this. There's this narrowing, and everyone watches the same thing. So there's that water cooler thing, so you can chat about it. But also, there's just, it's this more money spent in this central artist or program, or it's not good for independent artists like ourselves.
Workers of the world unite.
That's right.
Okay, well, just in time. Charles, don't be intimidated here, but we've got a lot of people here. I was intimidated, and I came on. So
yeah, that's amazing. I'm also I have to say, I'm like an overnight Creature Comforts fan. I started listening to the new album on the website streaming a couple days ago, and just I don't know how many times I've been through it now. It's fantastic.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That means a lot.
Just saying, you guys do great work. Holy cow.
Well, they've got to do a song about you now, and I think you've already done it. Big, buff, and handsome.
There you go.
I meant that in a non-gay. I'm a European. I'm a European. I can say things like that without it being gay.
Yeah, I lived in southern Spain for about 13 months, and you needed to learn about touch there. It was a whole different language.
Okay, well, we've been preparing with the show. We've been already going deep into the guys are worried about diversity and the way that their local environment's changing. They're in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you coming from, Charles? Where are you today?
Yeah, usually I have a lot of different answers for that, but with COVID, I'm pretty settled at this point. But for the last year and a half, I've been living on the Flathead Indian Reservation in northwest Montana. So I work at a biological station for the University of Montana up here. And a lot of it is still tribal land, thankfully. And that's where I am right now. So the town is called Ronan. It's a little tiny village off the highway.
Wow, I think we're all just pretty jealous right now. That must be a beautiful area.
It's stunning. And like every other part of the U.S. that I've lived in, it has its advantages and its disadvantages. But it's a very unique place, and the beauty is incredible. And this time of year, it is, really mind-blowing. I don't think anywhere I've lived in the world I've seen a spring as beautiful as the springs they have here. It's mind-blowing.
Whoa.
All right, so let's get. We're just jealous. I'm in the south of Italy.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, how can you be jealous? I've never made it to Italy, but I imagine, Mediterranean climate, and you're probably full blown into spring by now. Migratory birds coming back.
Yeah. You'd love it. You'd love it. But I think it's great to speak to you because. So maybe just roll it off. So you're what's the difference between a biologist and a naturist and a conservationist and this whole melting pot, and where do you fit into the scheme of things?
Sure. That's a very good place to start. And I think my answer to this is always very complicated because I would say this is one of my biggest character flaws, and perhaps an advantage sometimes, but I have a hard time choosing with things. And my answer to most questions of are you this or this is usually both. And this is applied for me professionally as well as, in creative and non-professional endeavors like the martial arts. Like my answer is always I want all of it. I want to do all of that. So of course the lines between these various fields are fuzzy. And one of the ways that I'm, sort of trying to brand myself as a professional, largely because I think it's something that's really needed, is as someone who can move between these different boundaries quite a bit. But to start breaking those down a bit, so a biologist would be anyone who's directly using the scientific method and scientific knowledge to study life in some capacity. And when you start adding subdisciplines like ecology or conservation biology, then you have someone who's using those principles, who's using that knowledge to and studying particular aspects of it. I think the difference between to make our first division, between a conservation biologist and an ecologist, or a molecular biologist or something like that, is that you also are making a jump into the applied from the theoretical. So when we think of sciences, a lot of the time we think about the ivory tower, and we think about people who are creating knowledge in some way, and it's totally inaccessible to everybody else, and they're the ones on the frontier, figuring out new stuff that we did not know before. Whereas if you thought of something like medicine, that's an applied science, right? You're making new knowledge, you're using scientific knowledge, but you're doing it for a reason, right? You're like, I want to save people. I want, this person in Milwaukee to not die of thyroid cancer. So I'm doing this research, right? So when you go over to conservation science, and I think this is one of the things that makes it different, and one of the things that makes it like addictive for me, is that I'm doing the science stuff, yes, but the reason I'm doing it is to solve some problem, to address some issue. In my case, right, it has less to do with Phyllis in Milwaukee and more to do with the Florida scrub jay or something, or some other endangered taxon, right? Some fish in the Yangtze River that is, it's the last of its kind, things like that. So trying to address some applied purpose in the environment. So that's where we get the conservation side, and that's within the larger science bubble. And the science of biology, which is now, of course, a very academic science, it grew from something a lot more organic and ancestral, which was natural history. And if you think of natural history, you think of like pith helmets and old white guys running around in the jungle and like, shooting birds and then saying, what is this? And that's what happened. I mean, because natural history, of course, is and was a Western style of thinking. It does have a lot of roots in imperialism and colonialism and things like that. But beyond that, it was a much broader exploration of nature. And so when you think of natural history, its roots were just coming from people just looking around and being like, what is this? What is going on? What am I seeing, and why? And this, people usually trace this back to Aristotle, who spent a lot of time on some island near Greece, I think, lying on a dock and staring into the water at sponges and cuttlefish, and just like coming up with like cosmic philosophy while staring at basically little squids. I mean, it's amazing. And Theophrastus, who's, I think, unfortunately, a lot of his works were lost, but he was another major old philosopher who spent time looking at nature. So natural history is this much larger, more organic, in my opinion, kind of colorful approach to understanding the living world around us and some of the non-living world, the natural world, if you want to make that kind of division. And so that can include, people like John Muir, who were writing, who creating beautiful written works of art about these systems while also learning about them. I mean, it's not strictly the science. And so I think you'd have natural history is the biggest thing that gave birth to biology and a lot of other studies of nature. Biology is strictly the scientific study. And of course, that can go into any aspect of nature, including our genes, our cell membranes, the proteins created in our bodies and how to engineer them. And of course, you get into biotech and all sorts of crazy stuff. But that's what led to all of these. And so for me, I think lately the titles that I spit out when I am asked to say, why don't you give us your professional titles or whatnot? I usually say conservation scientist, which is my professional discipline, naturalist, which is like my way of being in the world. Like I want to be out in that and learning about it and experiencing it, being a part of it. And then nature communicator is usually the third one, which is one of the ways that I see as just a citizen of the world, I can be contributing to the conservation crises that I perceive in ways that are, I don't want to say more or less effective. A lot of people make that judgment call, but I would certainly say in a way that does not overlap with my science in a big way. And so I can really be addressing very different problems. So that is my multi-pronged, very long response to that question.
That's a great answer. That was really good. So what got you into this? You were interested in nature and you wanted to be a scientist because you wanted to make a difference. Is that how it worked out? Or
kind of. I mean, obviously it was a lot messier than that. And I think that, the normal story you hear from people in my field especially people who fit my demographic of being, like white men who had a lot of privilege and grew up in a place like the US or the UK who got to have educational opportunities and things like that. The usual story you hear is like, I just loved tigers as a kid, and then I went and became a biologist, and here I am. And I wouldn't say my story is that simple. But I think it follows the archetype a bit. For me, the science part always. My father is an engineer and a scientist, and I grew up hearing about science all the time and thinking, gosh, what a powerful way of knowing. So I always had this idea that I would be a scientist, but I was a terrible student. Realistically, I couldn't pay attention in school. I had too much energy. It really wasn't working for me for a while. I think I had very little focus, and I was terrible at math. And so my hopes of becoming a scientist were not great in the first place. But I did connect with nature a lot, and for me, it was less about tigers and the Discovery Channel, and a lot more about what time of year do those grasshoppers come out? When do I start hearing the cicadas? It was backyard stuff. I was just there in it, and that was beautiful for me, and it was a place where I guess my energy and my shifting attentions could be really focused on something. And what really changed things for me in a lot of ways, and I guess this is tying into the other main thing that I'm always blabbing about to people. But honestly, what really did it for me, and I think what led to where I am now, was studying the martial arts, which sounds strange. And that's its own very long and convoluted journey with vicissitudes of decades. But I think what that did for me was offer a lot of focus, and it showed me that I could be good at something. And that led to me suddenly saying, oh, well, maybe I can, try in school. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe if I apply myself, things can work. And the other thing it did was the angle to which I approached the martial arts, especially at the beginning, was rooted in a lot of old philosophy, East Asian philosophy that I was getting really interested in. And we can, whatever time we have, we can get into that maybe eventually. But there was a lot of principle in that around what it means to live a full life. And one of the big things that came up, especially in the sort of martial arts and warrior tradition oriented philosophies, was, well, you have to protect something. If you have, I don't know what you want to call it, martial prowess or some power or some ability, right? It's meaningless. It's even destructive to the universe if you're not using that for some larger good. And so it kind of, the two things I got from that were like, one, yeah, maybe I can be good at stuff. And that was, I think for a lot of young people, that can be a revelation, just realizing I can do something. And then the second one was, oh, but if I'm going to do something, I need to help others with it. And it ended up making this kind of synthesis for me of like, wait a minute, I can study nature, I can do science. What if I do that to protect nature and to help people? So that's what led here. And it certainly was not as clear as it sounds. That's
great. I mean, a lot of the guests trying to service to others. So, and they've been very macro focused. I've been done a lot of songs already about global warming or the nuclear threat or the big problems. But hoping to speak to you, we could go down to more of a micro level. And how bad are things? We hear about species extinction and every second, but how bad are things? I mean, where you are is an untouched area. Surely, is it bad everywhere, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I might push back on even Montana being an untouched area. I think we don't have a lot of untouched areas on this planet, which is really a disturbing truth, but a very, very real truth. And I'm going to try really hard to keep this micro for you, but these issues and this might be one of my goals for today is to convince you and whoever's listening that biodiversity issues are extremely macro. I would say aggressively macro, and in fact, their degree
just blown my idea out of the water.
We'll get micro. I promise. We can talk about micro, like very small organisms. We can also talk about some smaller microsystems. We absolutely can. Thank you. But I will definitely say that not only are biodiversity issues macro, but they are so much more in your face macro than a lot of the other macro things that you think about. So you had a wonderful podcast recently with David Powell, is that his name? Who was from the Sustainababble, and just a fantastic talk about climate change. Just amazing. The more direct part of the planet that we interact with and that interacts with us through climate change is going to be biodiversity. So if you think about biodiversity affecting us in some way, there's this intermediary that is the life of the planet other than us. And that's, that is biodiversity. That's all of that. That's where a lot of these impacts are going to come, not just the abiotic, what we call, the non-living world, the storm surge getting worse, temperatures getting wonky, whatever. The biosphere controls so much of what makes this planet livable. It's not just like, oh yeah, we're a perfect distance from the sun and the Earth is tilted a certain way. Like life needs to rely on other life. You can't just start it like that. And even, if you look at the origins of life, it's some pretty fascinating, weird, coincidental stuff. And if you didn't have that to begin with, you'd never be here. And so if we eliminate that life, even if we address climate change issues, kept the temperatures from increasing too much, if the biosphere still gets wrecked, which is what's happening right now, we're still hosed. And it doesn't matter what we did about our carbon emissions. So it's a very, anyway, big macro there. So the question was about where are we biodiversity wise, right?
We've seen, Jesse was telling us about red ants and armadillos just before you came on, and how he was seeing just in his lifetime these changes.
Big time. Is this with the fire ants?
Yeah. Yeah, like when I was 14, I had a friend who moved from Alabama to Middle Tennessee, and he would talk about fire ants being in these like red ants and how they'd be everywhere, and we didn't have them. I grew up on a farm in Middle Tennessee, and within 2 years, you would see these ants everywhere. And when I grew up, you would never see armadillos. Like I would see those sometimes traveling, and then, now you'll see armadillo carcasses on the side of the road. It's like they followed the ants. Now the ants are gone elsewhere, but I don't know if that's their part of their life cycle or if that was, due to something else. But
and I'm definitely not an ant expert by any means, but I mean, what that sounds like to me is just very typical biodiversity change, environmental change, which is what we're witnessing today, right? Where our actions as humans are affecting these biological processes in so many weird and unexpected ways. And I'm gonna run with that example a bit. And for any ant experts listening or armadillo experts listening, if I'm way off, I'm sorry. But what you could take from this as an example is like, at least my understanding is that there's been a species, I think, of South American fire ant that's been spreading through the American South. When I worked in Florida, that was a big worry. And that's probably the right answer you're talking about. I'm not sure. Okay. Right. Sure, so that's an example of a concept of invasive species. And invasive species are a human impact, even though they are a natural thing or a biological thing. And what's going on there is, right, people in all of our doings and movings and livings of the world, we have moved organisms to a new place because we want them or don't. Or they got moved there accidentally by some process, and then they totally mess up, whatever equilibrium and intricate systems are going on there. The natural balance, if you want to get really cliche about it. The problem is that makes this huge ripple effect, right? The biological systems are this big net. It's this big like woven tapestry, and you can't just grab part and go, oh, you go over here. Like everything else starts to get stretched and displaced. And so what I'm at least hearing with the armadillo thing is, armadillos, as far as I know, are just native to a lot of the southern U.S. And so that they themselves, their population dynamics, all that was pretty natural and baseline. But I'm guessing what happened is because they're they will eat a lot of ants. One thing that might have happened was this invasive species came in. We know it had all sorts of other really bad impacts. It's been driving ground nesting birds extinct. It's been causing problems for all sorts of other insects. But it was probably benefiting the armadillos. And so it probably made armadillo populations go totally wacko when they wouldn't have before, because suddenly there was this new food source that was aggressively invading the whole South, and probably other elements in there too, like maybe people aren't hunting them as much or what have you. But yeah, that leads into, I guess, the how are we doing, which unfortunately is macro. But if we shrink it down to enough examples, maybe we can make this more micro. But geologists especially, there's an ongoing debate right now, and I'm pretty sure it's leaning towards yes. But there's a debate essentially of naming a new geological epoch in which we are right now. So the different geological epochs, right, are these. I'm not a geologist, so I'm going to mess this up. But a giant lengths of time defined by certain main drivers of what was going on the planet at the time. So there were like giant ice ages and different. Like one of the epochs, I think, was when algae and stuff started to make oxygen for the first time. And there was this huge increase in oxygen in the planet's atmosphere, which we didn't have before. And actually that oxygen was toxic to like most life. And like tons of stuff went extinct because nothing could handle oxygen, and everything that's left today, we're all descendants of those few microorganisms that could withstand oxygen. So there's a new epoch proposed called the Anthropocene. Anthro being, the root for people. And the idea is like we are now the dominant anything on the planet. We're not even just the dominant biological force. We're the dominant geological force. Like we are basically like the asteroid, like coming in and just boom and just wrecking everything and just because we're changing everything, right? We're not just like, oh my gosh, like all the elephants are gone because we couldn't stop buying ivory. Like we are changing everything to its very core. Below the biology, we're changing the heights of the tides, we're changing the ocean levels, we're changing the ice caps, right? So where we are right now, I would say, is the Anthropocene. We're in this time when like you literally can't find something we haven't impacted. People have gone out with microphones and tried to find where in the world you can find places where you don't ever hear human noise. And I don't remember what the statistic was, but like it was basically nothing. Like there almost aren't places you can go anymore where you won't hear a plane go over, where you won't hear like, I don't know, a radio or like some loud, motorbike engine in the background. There's almost nothing left. Or if you want to think about like another good way to think about it is like weight, like the actual physical amount of stuff, like the mass, right? And again, I don't have the actual numbers on me, but it's something crazy where like, probably on the order of like 7/8 of the living matter of the planet is like people, cows, and chickens. And so like it's insane. like just the weight of living meat in the world of just like animal flesh, like something crazy, like almost 90% of it is just us and the animals that we like, and we've eliminated everybody else. And like all of the biodiversity in the world, all the rainforests, all the whales in the ocean, all of that makes up for like the tiniest sliver of the actual weight of living organisms on the planet. It's insane. And the same goes for like the numbers too. I don't want to like horribly misquote, but also something crazy like, 1/4 or 1/5 of just all individual animals or something is like a cow. We have really taken over so much more than we think. And we keep having this image that there is like beautiful, wild land out there and there's something left untouched because we've been feeding ourselves that myth forever. And it's not true anymore. It's gone. And we have to do something about that.
That was real. That's a macro bummer.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important, I think, to put it in blunt terms that way, because I just feel like, are we going to talk about it or not? Like, are we going to?
We have to sing about it.
This and like recognize the are we going to sing about it? It's either we're talking about it or we're not going to, and I think it's important to just get it out.
I'm with you 100%, honestly, and I think singing about it is probably way more effective. I think obviously how you talk about it matters, but I haven't seen that many people try singing about it.
If you make it
So do you think all these invasive, because you're focusing on species extinction, and do you think that these invasive species are are replacing them. I mean, there's also dengue fever, mosquitoes. All the boundaries are changing. No, we're getting a lot more viruses coming through mosquitoes and things like that. Is it?
Oh boy, yeah. There are just so many giant cans of worms here. So, interestingly, most of my background and experience is with endangered species, and what I always, if I sit down with somebody on the plane, they're like, "What do you do?" I always try to say, "Well, I just try to keep things from going extinct." I try to make sure that everybody here right now, if y'all have grandkids or something, I'm like, I want your grandkids to see this bug or whatever it is. I want it to still be here. But I mean, my current job, I'm moving on to another job actually in a week, but my current job is invasive species focused. There are multiple things, acting at once. There's never a simple solution here. But one of the major players in species extinctions are these invasive species. They're huge, and their impacts are rapidly accelerating. And you hit a really, really good point there, Jack, where we are turning the tables towards these invasive species with how we're changing the planet. So with climate change, with landscape change, like us developing landscapes, cutting down more rainforests, we are like terraforming a lot of the time these environments specifically to favor the invasives. And so a really good example up here, again, this is not an untouched landscape at all. And I think calling it untouched is probably extreme anyway, right? Because there have been native peoples here for thousands of years, and they certainly interacted with the landscape in very direct ways. But what we're seeing here, for example, is we have an endemic fish species. So endemic meaning you cannot find it anywhere else. So it's a major tourist draw for Montana. They make a lot of their money through, rich people coming to do their fishing and hunting and stuff. And so there's this West Slope cutthroat trout, and it is adapted to these high mountain streams. Like Glacier National Park is right here; it's a major ecosystem here. It's adapted to these cold, icy high mountain streams, and that's where it can do its thing. And it's the best, competitor. It's perfectly adapted to that. It's been doing that for I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, and what's been happening is, especially I think starting in the 1800s, people started to introduce rainbow trout, which are delicious and really fun to fish for. They started to introduce them all over here so that people, just to boost the tourism industry. What's happening now is that those rainbow trout, which are not as well adapted to living in these really specialized places, they're taking over. They're out-competing these native trout. They're in the same genus, so they're actually breeding with them. And so there's this genetic dilution going on where the actual genes of these, of this species are getting wiped out. So it's an extinction by hybridization, right? They're not just getting wiped out and outcompeted, which they are, but they're also getting like bred out of existence, right? It's a weird dynamic. And what's making this way worse is that we are changing the climate and the landscape. What people have noticed is that like if you have more development and more roads and stuff around these rivers and streams, then the rainbow trout do better and they win over more often. Meanwhile, if it's cold and icy and like normal Montana conditions, the West Slope, the native species, does way better. But as climate change continues, that cold area is shrinking and going higher and higher up the mountains, right? So the refuges, the places where these native species can still live, are shrinking, and they're losing ground because of it. And this is happening all over the place, where once we've disrupted what's there, we favor those invasives over the native species, and yeah, I mean, it's a what do you call that? A positive feedback loop, right? These things are both affecting each other, and then you get this perfect storm. So invasive species are a big problem in general. They are definitely corresponding with climate change to get even worse a lot of the time.
Okay, and
yeah, well, I mean, for a minute, talking about invasive species, Alex was talking about KUDZU earlier. He's Appalachia, and so if you want to ask a little bit about that, because I'm curious how climate change will affect something like KUDZU, which I've seen my whole life.
Yeah, as far as like the
what's KUDZU?
There's a ton of
for
KUDZU.
non-Americans.
Yeah,
it's like a vine that grows extremely fast and looks like kind of almost like ivy that can cover things. And I mean, it will just cover everything. And they say in the summertime it can grow almost a foot a
Jeez.
day or something crazy. I mean, it grows so fast, and we'll just cover everything. And there's also been a lot of blight that's killed or will like infect pine trees, and they'll sort of rot and die out. And the American chestnut, which I think they're bringing back, or they've tried to bring. I don't even know where the status of that is right now, but that's a species that was sort of, as far as I know, indigenous to that sort of region that eventually just went extinct, probably because of that, some sort of blight.
Yeah, an invasive pathogen, right?
Yeah. So like
For sure. Yeah, I mean, those are all such good examples. Like, I think you're just bringing up so many good points there. Yeah, kudzu. I haven't spent enough time in the South. Weirdly, I will say, so I'm actually moving to Georgia in a few months, so I'm gonna be in the South for quite a while pretty soon. So I'll be getting very familiar.
What's
with
the
kudzu.
next job?
The next job is going to be with the River Basin Center at the University of Georgia. Honestly doing the stuff that I love. So doing a lot of research on the interactions. So basically, we have society on one side and biodiversity and ecosystems on the other side. Or this is how we like to perceive it, right? And there are all these different ways we interact. And my focus and my interest is in where water is the thing that we're interacting through, right? It's the medium through which we are getting impacted by life, by wildlife and by ecosystems, and one of the major ways that we are affecting those systems. So that's what I'll be focusing on there, and actually looking at some synergies. So we're going to be working with the Army Corps of Engineers, trying to figure out, okay, we know floods are going to get worse in the South. We know that those floods are going to hurt a lot of people, a lot of very vulnerable people too, right? Those are the first people who are going to be harmed by this. How can we use natural systems, restore and fix natural systems around water to protect those water resources for people who need them, but also protect the people from things like, catastrophic flooding and things like that. So that's going to be my kind of job there, is trying to kind of mutually and synergistically meet the needs of wildlife conservation and people.
Save the people and the water and the plants.
Yeah. I mean, if you just, I think we're already hitting upon this a little bit, right? If you think about nature, and ecosystems and the Anthropocene, you see this just massively complicated tabernacle, right? Just ecology itself and the ecosystems are so immensely complicated, and the only ones that we have like a reasonably good understanding of are usually in temperate regions like UK and northern North America, where they're kind of simple. There aren't a ton of species, and we've studied them for like 100 years. And that's the only time we have any remotely good understanding of how these things work. So you think about this massively complicated system, and then you add in people, right? With our culture and our politics and our economics and everything. How much more complicated does that become? I mean, you couldn't process those things in a gigantic supercomputer. It's way too much. And so what you have to do, right, when you're faced with a system that's that complicated, you have to look for, what's a good word for it? You have to look for the central nodes. You have to look for the core of that system, right? If there's all these different moving parts, maybe you could find one little switch that if you turn that, it makes a ton of difference, right? Whereas there's maybe parts on the periphery that don't do anything if you mess with them. And so in my mind, what I'm seeing in my research and what makes me so interested in water is that I think water is one of those major things where if we focus on that, we can start saving more species, we can start protecting more people, we can start addressing climate change, we can start, being more resilient to planetary shifts that threaten us. We can protect underserved communities, things like that. So in my opinion, water is that like perfect little spot where if we're going to put a bunch of effort in, that's where we want to do it. And it can affect all these different things at once. That's the water thing.
How much have you seen like in some of these species, like cultural significance of things like that trout in Montana? I mean, how much does that play a role in what you do and how you go about the work you do, like in maintaining, the cultural relevance or importance of regional specific species?
Wow. You guys have really good questions.
Good questions. Yeah.
This is fantastic. Dang. I would say it impacts my work a bit depending on the system I'm working in. And now we can get a little more micro, I suppose. But I want it to impact my work a lot more. And that's part of why I'm getting so into nature communication and nature podcasting and nature storytelling, is because I want to recreate the cultural significance. I think that is one of the main things we can do to get society to care about this stuff. So, one example out here that's a little bit looser, but the West Slope cutthroat trout is one of the major species I'm working on here in terms of preventing invasives from wiping them out. They have, as far as I understand it, a pretty strong cultural significance to a lot of the First Nations or Native Indigenous people out here. The Salish, Kootenai, Pend d'Oreille, Blackfeet. There's a bunch of other tribes that passed through or inhabited this area at various times. And so there is cultural significance there, and there is interest, from tribes and people working with the tribes in protecting these things solely for their intrinsic value, right? And I think that is what I find most valuable about the cultural significance in conservation, is that we're not just like, like so much of our world now is just driven by dollars. I don't want to sound quite so, dour and cliche about it, right? But like, we are just in this like intensely neoliberal period in history where if we don't put a dollar on something, no one cares. And the number of things that still have intrinsic value that are not related to the dollar sign are fewer and fewer. And that really scares me. And so I think, and this is a product of Western colonial culture, right? I mean, this grabby, money, greedy attitude, this came from, our European ancestors showing up on new continents and being like, I can make so much money here. I'm going to pretend that this is about Jesus. I'm going to pretend that we are going to, that we're going to save everybody by bringing them closer to God. But really, I'm just going to make a ton of money, right? And that's why like so many European countries are like loaded. When I was in southern Spain, I visited there's a gigantic cathedral in Seville, the city I lived in. I could see it from my apartment. It's beautiful. Where Christopher Columbus is buried. He's there. And he was, he was part of this gigantic, supposedly religious, but largely economic thing where people were going to places they didn't understand. They didn't have any intrinsic value of the wildlife. They had no cultural connection to those ecosystems. And what was their opinion of everything? Money. Let's grab all the gold. Let's get all the silver. And if you go into those cathedrals now, they are, it's beautiful. It's stunning, the artwork and everything. But literally there are like walls of gold, just like beautiful statues of Mary and Jesus and like crazy religious stuff. And it's all gold and it's all silver. And where did that come from? Right? And right outside, they have a massive ficus tree in the fig family, ficus tree. Those aren't native to Europe. Where did they get that tree? That's a rainforest tree from the American tropics, right? It's all there. And so, yeah, I think we, and by we, I mean the largely, Anglo-Saxon, Western European, dominant economic and cultural power on the planet today, certainly for worse, that group of people who are so in charge of the world today in so many ways, we have so much to learn from our older ways before things became more like that and so colonially focused, and so much to learn, especially from indigenous people. And it's not their responsibility to do this. It's our responsibility to learn from it, but it's not their responsibility to teach us or help us. We got ourselves in this mess. But we need to learn how to assign intrinsic value to these things again. And I'll give you the example that I always pull out on people who push me on this stuff, because it happens to me all the time, especially living in an area with a lot of very conservatively minded people. People are always like, come on, man. Like they're always trying to be clever because they read a couple books, and they're always like, hey, extinction happens all the time. The dinosaurs are extinct. Mm-hmm. What's the problem? And this is always the example I pull out. I said, yeah, it's annoying, right? You get these like trolls, but they have a point in it. You have to engage with people. as angry as some of this stuff makes me, I'm not gonna. At least I think, being part of that larger, white male power structure, I think it's kind of my job. I need to be the one who engages with those people from my demographic and says, no, you can't think like this. Anyway, the example I pull out is this. People die all the time, right? Do we feel reasonable about that? That's a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people die nowadays from cancer. Mm-hmm. So let's think about it. We've got a 2-year-old kid in some big hospital, and this kid has some kind of, I don't know, juvenile onset leukemia that, who knows, maybe it's from his or her genes, or it's from some kind of environmental exposure. But basically, this child is going to die in 6 months unless we invest $3 million. If you go around and ask all these people, well, what should we do? The majority of them say, oh my gosh, that's awful. I mean, we have to do something. We have to save this kid. Why do they say that? I don't think it's because the kid's worth money.
They don't want to give up.
We're not about to go sell this kid's organs in the black market, right? Right? I mean, I don't know. Some people are weird, but like we're assigning intrinsic value to a human life, right? How much trouble do we go through if somebody, I don't know, some 30-year-old hiker, gets their arm jammed in a rock or whatever? We go out and save them. We go pay for a helicopter, do all this crazy stuff. Now, what if somebody is, 97 years old and their heart's worn out and they're just going to die? Well, yeah, we'll do stuff to save them. But, I think a lot of people say, okay, well, yeah, they're 97 years old. I get it. They might say something cliche like, oh, well, that's life, that they lived a good life. The intrinsic value there is that we're saying that there's a value to human life, and there's a value to getting to live that life, right? That's what everybody always says about like trying to, save children, especially, right? Is like, well, yeah, but they didn't get to live their life yet. What's the difference between that and a species? Yeah, people die all the time. Yeah, species go extinct all the time. But the difference is with, the cancer baby argument, that child is not getting to live their life, something we intrinsically value. If we're driving a species extinct now that in all likelihood had, geological timescales left in its existence, right? Why do we have why don't we intervene? Why do we have the right to just, if we cause that to happen, why don't we stop it? And if you don't assign any intrinsic value, there's no argument there. But I think we need to reestablish that. Not just because, in my opinion, all of these species are intrinsically valuable. But again, we rely on this thin film of life wrapped around the planet. If that's gone, that's it. And each one of those species plays some role in that, in its stability and its performance, right? With these ecosystem services. So yeah, I think we need to bring back that cultural value. It's really, really important. And it makes a huge difference. I did my whole PhD on a couple of endangered water birds in Hawaii. And I ended up being really fortunate to interact with a lot of indigenous people from Hawaii and learn a lot about the role that some of these animals had in their cultural heritage, in their mythology, in their stories. And that drastically increased the acceptance rate and the interest and the willpower people had in saving those birds. Because it was like, no, this isn't just whatever duck, in the swamp. This is the alaula. This is this animal that brought fire to our people. This is this, hugely important figure. This was the pet bird of, Hina, the goddess who was the mom of the Hawaiian Hercules, Maui, who's in that, Disney movie now. That cultural importance makes it totally different because we go from, the lowest level of valuing wildlife, which would be like, it's entertaining to us or it's useful to us, which is kind of like ownership, which is, I guess, something you're assigning some value. It brings us way beyond that to something more like kinship. We don't just say you're useful to me, right? You wouldn't treat another human being that way. I hope, right? You wouldn't just be like, this guy can do a favor, do me a favor. That's great. Instead you're feeling like, no, like we're the same here. We have something in common. And so I respect that. I see that. And I want to have some moral obligation to that. Right. So that huge rant aside, I think cultural values to wildlife are the most important thing right now for conservation. I think we need to just change people's attitudes. I think, I love the science work I get to do. It's tremendously, intellectually engaging. It's fantastic. But if we're not changing the culture side right now, we're in big trouble. And that's where the nature communicator thing comes in for me. Is I'm trying to help resurrect that.
Yeah, this was something that we kind of touched on earlier with, seeing some of our communities that we grew up in, like small communities in the South, sort of lose some of their regional specificity and then just get taken over by bigger corporations. Now you've just got, Walmarts and Hardee's and whatever, where it used to be mom and pop shops and, this and that. And so, I think a lot of those regions were also tied inexorably in some way to the, regional, climate and the regional biodiversity and specific, species that live there. But I think it's definitely true. And I think there's such a connection to be made between losing some of that sort of biodiversity and that specificity and, losing that sense of cultural, like interpersonal connection. But we've also lost that interspecies connection as well, where it's just we don't see that intrinsic value.
Yeah. I feel like we as a species are totally disconnected from nature at this point. And I think I kind of feel like part of that has to do with just like how we get our food now.
Oh yeah.
I think that really on a subconscious level, sort of you end up devaluing other life because you're eating it, but you also don't have to see how, like what had to happen for that to take place, and a whole other list of factors, I'm sure, but the one that comes immediately to mind is the way we consume food and how it's.
I will say to that note, I feel like one good thing that could come out of COVID is I do think it made people actually think about the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing just doesn't magically appear at Kroger. Like you don't snap your fingers and get Cheerios. Like someone has to bring it in a truck. Someone has to grow the wheat somewhere. And I do think that maybe if there's, there might be a few good things to come from this whole pandemic thing. And I think that might be one of them is an awareness of the supply chain that could lead back to an awareness of the first stop in the supply chain, which is often nature.
Whoa.
And another, really speaking about supply chain, I mean, even more recently, the Suez Canal block, like I gotta imagine, I would think, fruits, vegetables, anything that comes from other parts of the world toward wherever it's going, is going to have significant difficulty. So like you've got COVID screwing with the supply chain, but now you've got this. I mean, really. You've seen the photos. That's what's happening. It's plugged up.
I hate when my canal gets.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it makes you aware of that level of what do you call that globalization of it. I mean, it's wild. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you guys. You're just hitting on so many just massive points. It's as if you guys
down to a song. So yeah, well, they have. But we have to narrow this down into a song. So what's the most important? Because you're doing a TED talk soon, aren't you, about natural history and the outdoors as fuel for innovation? What's that going to be about?
Yeah, so that's obviously with. I don't know how many times that's been postponed now with COVID stuff, and so we'll see where that happens. But that's in there's a TEDx group in Bozeman, in Southwest Montana, a really cool area, and they invited me, just about a year ago. And I think we're finally thinking things might shake out in October. But that talk is about kind of another approach that I'm trying to take to get people to start connecting with and valuing nature more. And specifically, I would say targeting some demographics that I think have a gigantic power to make a big difference. And I think I think people from all different kind of career levels and different avocations and pursuits and disciplines and things have a major role to play in this. I don't think that there's a type of person or a type of professional who can't do something amazing for nature right now. But one group that I'm focusing on a lot is entrepreneurs and business people and CEOs and people who have to think at really, really high levels with huge demands on their intellectual capabilities and thinking and creative energy. And there's a really increasing amount of literature showing how exposure to nature can essentially just chemically alter your brain, right? In ways that are very favorable to your creativity, to your mental and emotional health. If you're a spiritual thinker, I think it's undeniable that it's doing something major for you in that capacity. And at the same time, if you want to get more literal, think of the amount of inventions and innovations and new ideas that have just come directly from nature. Right? I can't remember what it is now. It's maybe something as high as 30% or more of just medicines and pharmaceuticals were either directly synthesized from living organisms, right? Because plants and animals and fungi and microbes all over the planet, all the time, are in these just constant, intense, I don't want to call them wars, but these kind of almost contests. What's that?
Struggles.
Yeah.
Struggles.
I don't want to paint this like old fashioned, nature red in tooth and claw portrait of it. But there's this constant process of innovation through how evolution works, through how genetics work. That means that like you have just the entire planet, all of that wild biodiversity is this gigantic laboratory constantly coming up with new chemicals, new strategies, new mechanisms, new structures, right? That didn't exist before, or that maybe did and are coming back, that are addressing all these different biological tasks. And so what we've found is that we haven't even scratched the surface on the number of biologically active compounds that come from plants that can be found all over the world. And those have already, that tiny bit that we've already seen has already contributed hugely to just medicine. And then if you go beyond chemicals to actual physical structures, right? Velcro came from a plant, that idea, right? There are people trying to make better landing gear for aircraft that have to land in sandy environments based on how camel feet are structured. There's so much inspiration you can find in nature that is direct, and that's huge. And there's so much benefit you can get to how creative you are from being in nature, just because of how it changes your brain chemistry. And then the third thing, which I'm really trying to start pointing people towards, is that, we're human beings. We're not, macaques or foxes or whatever. We're beyond just like the tool using intelligence. We also have a lot of abstract thinking. We can make metaphors. We can make art. We can think about things, beyond just the literal and the mechanical. And so think about the enormous amount of innovation you can get from observing and learning about nature that is abstract. How well can you find solutions to things by analogy with nature, by studying how these different organisms are interacting, beyond just, let me imitate that one mechanism in the way the mantis's claw works, or let me steal that chemical from, that leaf of a tropical aerial plant. But how can I find solutions to my problems in life and in business by observing how organisms solve their problems, by witnessing how ecosystems change over time? How can I find, people even use ecological terms now in business, right? They talk about disrupting business ecosystem, whereas like if you have a forest and it's totally locked in with some what we call climax tree species that are shading everything out, and no other saplings can grow. If you burn it down, right, all these new species will arise. A whole new ecosystem comes up, and it goes through this process of succession. And a lot of ecosystems actually depend on periodic disturbance to continue adapting to circumstances, and you actually increase the species diversity and things like that. So people talk about, I want to disrupt this industry. Well, what are they talking about? They're talking about ecology. So what if you studied ecology? What if you looked at forests that burned down, or places where the ice sheets retracted, or what have you, or where there's been a catastrophic flood, and you watch what's going on, and you pay attention, you study what species are coming, how are they interacting, what's going on. That could probably tell you so much about how to disrupt an industry, how to start anew someplace, how to carve out your niche, right, which is an ecological term, to have a good business. How do I interact with the other businesses that are already here in a way that's going to be sustainable, or economically viable? So that's the focus of my talk is all the different ways that I think nature exposure, nature learning, and nature connection are just this huge, totally untapped resource and boon to the business community, to the entrepreneurship community, and of course also to everyday people who just need to solve their own problems, be they existential or professional or personal. And so it's part of that effort of me trying to remind, especially a certain group of people who I think have a lot of power to make a difference, that nature has this enormous value just to us directly, and then also, hopefully, engendering in them more of that cultural intrinsic connection too. That would be the next step, And I think if you get business people, CEOs, and entrepreneurs thinking about these issues, realizing how much that can help them, you can get people who are really behind a lot of these big drives, economically and culturally, to also care, and that kind of, that might be a good top down kind of way of approaching some of that cultural change.
Oh, I'm inspired. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to go into the woods now. I'm so inspired.
You absolutely should do it. Go see some cool birds. Find a neat bug on the ground. That's what it's all about.
So, do you have anything else to round this up, then, guys?
This is just an aside for me personally to know. You said you're a martial artist. What do you study?
This is kind of the problem with me wanting to do everything all the time. Is I started. My two big influences are, so I've been studying martial arts for almost 20 years now, and the two big influences on me were Bruce Lee, of course, at the beginning, and then a guy named Ueshiba Morihei, who's was a Japanese incredible martial artist back in the 40s through 70s ish. And Bruce Lee's main thing, right, was it's not about pick and choose. It's not about having a style. You just need to go and you find what works, and you focus on that. And so for me, it's just been this journey where also I try in getting my naturalist and scientist career going. I've had to move all the time. And so I'm always ending up in a new place and just like, oh, well, what can I learn here? So for me, honestly, so I don't have a count of how many martial arts styles I've studied. And if I had to say how many of them I've, studied pretty seriously for a amount of time and, achieved some rank in, it's probably 11 or 12. But I started with, Jeet Kune Do and Aikido and a lot of traditional Japanese martial arts. Jeet Kune Do, of course, is very modern. That was Bruce Lee's whole thing. And then I got into, wrestling and boxing. Right, yeah. Right now, with COVID, it's a little hard, but I have a closed community here, a tribal run gym of a lot of really just great people who are wrestlers and Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners. I have a lot of background and I have a brown belt in karate and a couple black belts in Aikido. And I did Muay Thai. I started doing Muay Thai a few years ago, really loved it. And that's just been a big passion of mine. So out here lately, I've been, learning jiu-jitsu and working on my grappling a lot, and kind of MMA applications. And then teaching
you're
a bit of Muay Thai.
You're on the wrong podcast. You should be on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, there's a lot to go through there. But that's what it's been for me. Is a lot of different styles. And they all feed into each other. I find truths above all of them that kind of feed in. I assume you must have some interest as well.
Well, yeah, I study
Oh,
it's
nice.
Ishinryu karate. It was developed in the 50s in Okinawa, and have a black belt in that. But I've also studied. It's hard to explain, but it's like a combatives. This guy that's very high in combatives and travels around the world, but he sort of cherry picks from all these different styles. And I guess earlier, to take it back to nature, you were discussing, how we can get influence from nature, and like my understanding is that's sort of how the martial arts developed, was studying how animals defend
Oh my
themselves.
gosh, yeah. Wow. That's a big time. You really rounded it up. You put a bow on it.
Sort of tied it together.
But yeah, you're totally right. All those old kung fu styles and a lot of the ancient stuff, and the yoga and old Indian practices, that a lot of them are thought to be the predecessors of a lot of traditional martial arts. Yeah, so much of that came from watching animals fight. And as a behavioral ecologist, for me, it's always interesting, studying animal behavior and looking at the way fighting goes on with animals, and conflict and things like that. We've still got a lot to learn, I think, beyond just techniques and how to hurt somebody, but also in how they approach it.
Right.
You don't see animals going around doing mass shootings and stuff like that. It's very different. Fighting is often very what's the word for it? It's very ritualized. They even animals that really get at it and go at within species, usually they find ways to do it, to solve their differences without real violence, even if it looks very violent. It's not typically that deadly. And then predators and prey, the whole different thing. It's never about sadism or there's no ego to it. It's just like, oh, I see that mouse, it's dead. Okay, I'm gonna get my meal. We're moving on. There's no crap involved. And I think we get humans in violence. We get wrapped up in weird egotistical ways, and I think we still have a lot to learn from that.
All right, guys. Well, anything else? Feeling fully inspired?
Wow. I got to thank you guys for being here, and especially for having me. I seriously, I love your music. I'm probably going to be listening to it. I got a nice long drive coming up. I'm going to listen to that album a couple more times. Fantastic stuff. Really.
Awesome. Thank you.
Glad you enjoyed it.
It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Chat
I hope
with
we
you.
can be in touch, especially once I'm a little closer to you.
This year. Good luck.
Yeah. Are you going to be in Athens? That's actually where we recorded our record. So,
oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah. There's a I don't know if you drink beer, but there's a brewery down there called Creature Comforts. Ironically,
just no relation.
No connection.
Coincidental.
All right. I mean,
you're right.
Are you guys maybe gonna tour through Georgia at some point? All right. Okay.
Eventually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Eventually,
it would be amazing to see you guys live.
You're on the list, brother.
I love it. Especially was it Candle, I think. I'm trying to remember the name of the track. I was too busy listening. No, I'm telling you, there was that one, and then I Won't Last or something, or I'm Not Gonna Last Long. What was it? Those two.
Yeah, I Won't Last Forever. Yeah.
I was just
I Won't Last Forever.
Yeah, I was going on a walk yesterday and just like absolutely vibing to that. So I can't thank you enough for your music and your talent. You guys are great.
Hell yeah.
Thank you. Those are the
Really?
B-side songs too, man. I appreciate that.
I always like
I like them.
Man, I love them.
Did you like any of my songs, Charles?
Yeah.
How many favorites?
I haven't heard as many yet, because I usually get through the podcast and then like 50 minutes in, I'm like, oh crap, I gotta go. So I gotta listen to more of the actual songs. But
all right.
But I've been loving the interviews. Like, what was her name? Madhu. That incredible journalist you interviewed.
Madhu Trehan.
There were a couple of.
You're just trying to. Yes. You don't have to make it up to me. It's all right. Don't.
No.
The band's the star here. I understand. It's okay.
When you contacted me,
okay.
I was like,
don't worry, Charles. Don't worry.
The faces you're making me right now. But no, I mean, yeah, and I can't thank you guys enough for the opportunity. I mean, I really, you've had some real heavy hitters on the podcast, some incredible conversations, and I couldn't be more grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been great having you. I'll stick around with the band for a minute. We'll talk about the song Behind Your Back.
Excellent.
And then we'll send it to you as soon as it's done.
Sounds good. Well, again, I appreciate
All right,
your
Charles.
time and
All right.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Later.
Bye.
Oh, great, eh? So, feeling inspired? You've got any ideas for the song? Because we have to think of a particular angle here. Because I mean, we cover so much. Where are we going to go with it?
I mean, I guess I'm assuming we're not the first collaboration that you've done. I mean, I know you've been doing most of these.
You're not the first notch on my bedpost.
Okay, that's good. So, I mean, do you normally write the lyrics when you do this, or how? What's your preferred?
Well, songs I've done so many. I have sort of a bodily function now. Sort of a song comes out afterwards, and then I can send it to you, and you do the same. Maybe you have one, and then we'll decide on one.
Okay.
Or sometimes it's a middle and a verse, and you take the chorus. And
I got you.
But however it goes, I mean, I don't really have any ideas for what this could be about yet. I mean, you got to look for that angle, no? I mean,
Yeah.
you know when you're writing lyrics, you really need that.
I know. I keep thinking about that. Yeah, the
that's
small
what I would
town
like to,
stuff, things changing,
Yeah.
things, and it can, I mean, that could lend itself to being pretty depressing, I think. But I think we can
Make the choruses
angle
nice
it in a hopeful. There's so much hope
Yeah.
there too.
Right.
I
So
was
Walmart's this
brimming with
the
ideas.
invasive
I was
franchises.
I was like, I'm really
Yeah.
feeling.
Because humans are the invasive species here. You know, we are the.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but
Now we're being, even we're dying out. So
Yeah.
our culture and
I think about it too, like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the structure, and it's like, well, there's like a perspective of someone living in a smaller community and seeing it change.
yeah,
You can see it change from, the destruction of land and
Mhm.
like the disappearance of mom and pop stuff.
yeah,
And I'm trying to think about how you could shift that from each verse, have a verse that make it a progression of some sort. Hard to say, put into words what I mean, but yeah,
just so much imagery in that.
walking down the street, mom and pop's boarded up. And
Yeah,
the spring that used to play in when you were a kid is now a Walmart.
Yeah.
And
the wells run dry.
wells
and
run
the-
dry, and you can't drink the water here because
Yeah.
the mining up the road has polluted all the
Yeah.
fresh water, and so you could
There's a line in this Robert Bly poem about a tree that's fallen, and the hole in the tree is now facing upward, catching rain. Which, I mean, that's obviously going to go like, you don't want to take that long to unpack something like that, but like that sort of hopefulness within despair kind of thing.
it has to be hopeful. Like the chorus has to be
totally,
can't
that's
depress
what I'm
people too
thinking.
much,
I would like to bring it back the verses can kind of ruminate on like, oh, this sucks, why this has changed, this is not good, and then in your choruses you could figure out a hook that is shift to a major or something, and kind of uplift it.
Sounds like it's in good hands, guys.
We'll figure something out.
All right. Well, it's been a real pleasure. I really had a great time with you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, this was
I
really
really
fun.
appreciate
It was fun.
the opportunity. How'd you find us? I guess that's what I'm really curious about.
You were on a playlist. I think
Oh,
Big Buff and Handsome was on a
Nice.
Spotify playlist, and we have a
That's-
researcher that goes through and finds suitable
Wow.
tracks. And
He
That's
Googled,
awesome.
He Googled, I'm feeling lucky.
no, I was just curious. Well, this is really cool, and I think it's really cool what you're doing. And
Thank you. And you can self-produce. Yeah, you're.
yeah,
Yeah.
we can't track drums. That's the only
Right.
thing I can't track. But
Okay.
I mean, it depends
Well, we
on
can-
what.
We can do that. I mean, it depends what we. I mean, you want to go what kind of genre as well? I mean, what you want to stick with? What? I mean, because you could do boot gazing or disco roadie. I mean, what we can.
I mean, I feel like it might be too hard to tell that. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
We'll have to
Let's
flesh
just
it
go
out.
with what the song has. Yeah, let's just go
We'll play something, and
Yeah.
but I think if it's going to be that sort of small town thing, keep it a
It needs to
little,
be an acoustic guitar.
keep it a
Yeah.
little,
Yeah, definitely an
Probably
acoustic
no
guitar
banjo,
at some
but-
point. Oh yeah, you could play banjo.
slide.
with. I want banjo in there. Definitely
Mourn-
banjo.
mournful slide guitar or
Yeah.
banjo.
Brilliant, guys. I can't wait. It's going to be so exciting.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Take
Thanks.
care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
The sickness came in and killed off the pine. I got my lumber at the Walmart for $2.99. The river dried up when push turned to shove. And now we're choking on the kudzu from heaven above. What can one man do to stop the invasion spreading around you? What can one man say to keep all the nature from fading away? I don't wanna talk to strangers, I want to be with my friends. You tell me it's the beginning when it feels like the end. I fell asleep in Tullahoma when I opened up my eyes. It was a town like any other that I didn't recognize. What can one man do to stop the invasion spreading around you? What can one man say to stop the darkness from leading the day? What can one man do to stop the invasion spreading around you? What can one man say to keep all the nation from fading away? I can fight, I can walk, I can talk, and I can listen, I can teach, I can learn, I can laugh, and I can cry. What can one man do? 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 What can one man
Well done, guys. What a track. What an episode. A modern classic. Please follow Creature Comfort on Spotify. Go to their website, follow them Instagram, Facebook. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks, guys. It was a real pleasure. And thanks also to musicians Massimino Vozzo, who played drums on that, and Maurizio San Nicola, who played the organs and also produced it. As always, please share this episode with anyone you think might enjoy it. Please share the song. It'll be released on the 3rd of December on all music streaming services. Do everything you can to help promote the show. We really appreciate it. And if you want to hear another great podcast, please go to Mystic Cast, which is the show that I use to promote the Ethereal Society, who helped inspire me to do this podcast. Okay, until next time, have a great day.